Hey yo, and we're back. Now before we start this, shout out to a certain someone by the name of Chalky for becoming an EZA member, also the other members as well. If you want to join and become a member, you can click the link in the description down below, or you can just click the join button. I sometimes do forget I do have memberships enabled, so yeah, link is down there if you do want to join, or you can just click the join button. It's only like 99 cents for the lowest tier, I'm pretty sure. Mostly want people to join so we can unlock more emotes though. Anyways, obviously, this is a continuation of a previous thing I've done, so if you haven't seen that, go look at that first. In that part, we covered the key gacha units, and in this one, we're going to cover the situational ones. And don't forget, both of these are mainly aimed at the beginner phase. With that being said, I'm going to just use past me to use the same message again. Now, since this is probably going to be a pretty big video, I'm going to add this disclaimer here. Keep in mind, this is a guide. It's not something you should strictly follow to a one-to-one ratio. Everyone's account is different, everyone has different units, and everyone is in different situations. With a massive new wave of players coming in, I've seen a lot of people misusing guides, so I just wanted to make that very clear. Take the info that you need and use it to your advantage. Whether that be one thing, two things, or this entire video. Just take whatever you feel is important to your account and use it. And as always, I recommend not only strictly following one guide, but search for multiple guides and take apart all the info that you need from each of the guides. That is the best way to use guides, whether that be just searching up other guides or gathering info from the community and other platforms. Whatever it may be, just grab what you need and put it together to get your ultimate info. I also have a Discord as well, so if you want to join that and maybe ask for help down there, there's plenty of people that would want to help you down there if you just ask. So yeah, that will be linked in the description. But without further ado, let's begin because this is going to be a pretty long video. Well said, my past self. But yeah, let's begin. In case you skipped here, just a reminder that this is a continuation of a previous video, so go watch that first. Let's go. So first we are starting with the rare situational gacha units. Now another reminder, there's no specific order you should get these units in, but these are the ones I do recommend, and whichever you need first, just get that one. Now let's start off with Catalyte, aka Rover Cat's true form. This is a meat shield that will help especially in the true beginner phase of Into the Future and when you first fight those aliens, but even later on it could go on to help out in Cats of the Cosmos and many other mid-game or late-game stages with like Start Aliens. And it does have a nice niche, being it is a unwarpable unit, aka it is not affected by warp, it completely negates it. So if you're facing a troublesome enemy with warp, Catalyte is really helpful there. And against its trait, aliens, it is extremely helpful as a meat shield because it has the strong effect. And if you don't know what the strong ability does, basically you deal 1.5 times more damage to that trait and you take only 0.5 times damage from that trait. So basically you do 50% more damage and take 50% less damage. While we are within this alien niche, I gotta mention, of course, Neo Psycho Cat, aka Psycho Cat's true form. Like I mentioned in the previous video, this is in some ways like an alien counter version of Sanzo, except it doesn't have many of the benefits Sanzo has, like area attack and the decent cost and the spammability, but that does not take away the good use you can get out of Neo Psycho Cat, because Neo Psycho Cat is able to outrange many of the pesky alien enemies you'll be facing, and it could pretty much carry your crowd control all the way through Into the Future and Cats of the Cosmos as well. So it has good range, it is decently stackable, it has a relatively low cost as well, and it has that nice crowd control. Also, its crowd control effect is not guaranteed, but it is at 50% chance for 4 seconds. Speaking of crowd control units, here are two other crowd control units that are situational and can help out tremendously in some cases. And first of all, it is Dread Pirate Catly, aka Pirate Cat's true form. There's not too much to say here since this is a very niche pick, because in some cases the knockback crowd control effect can screw you over, but in some stages it could help out tremendously. For example, in early SOL in the beginner phase, a stage like Last Gang, Pirate Cat can completely demolish that stage with its crowd control, and even for stages like in the early mid-game like Manic Island and Baku, Pirate Cat can help out there as well. Has good cost, has good range, it has a nice crowd control, and it is somewhat stackable as well. It also has some helpful talents, such as Survive and its Immune to Waves talent that could help out in a stage like Manic Island. Overall, a solid situational crowd control unit against red enemies. And next up we have Necrodancer Cat, aka Necromancer's true form. This is also a unit that doesn't need too much explanation. It has a solid range, it is a low or decent cost, it does act as a single target crowd control unit like Pirate Cat, but it has a much better niche and crowd control effect, that being the freeze against floating. The reason why this is not a main crowd control unit for floating, first of all, is because Sanzo exists and completely overshadows Necrodancer in every possible way. However, there is a unique way you can use Necrodancer, and that is as support with other crowd control units. So pairing up Necrodancer with like Thaumaturge or even with Sanzo is very helpful in some stages. On its own, it's not too reliable at all. Yes, it could stack up decently fast. Yes, it has a solid range and a decent attack animation as well. It is single target, that is one downside, but the biggest thing about Necrodancer is the freeze chance is only 20%, which is not something you should really rely on as a main crowd control effect. Yes, Sanzo's chance is the same at 20%. The thing with Sanzo is it is much more spammable, it has a quicker attack animation. Yes, it has less range, but it has lower cost. And also, a big thing, it is area attack, while Necrodancer is single target. Also, Sanzo's talents are just far better as well. So yeah, a very niche anti-floating crowd control unit that can be used in some stages and can be used to support other crowd control units like Sanzo and Thaumaturge. Next up, of course, I have to mention Wushu Cat's true form, aka Shingong. Like I briefly mentioned in the previous part to this video, this is basically the ultimate anti-zombie meat shield. It has the resistant effect, so it does take that 25% damage from its trait, which is of course an anti-zombie unit. But it also has those nice bonuses such as Z-kill, and it also is not affected by slow. It could completely negate slow, which helps in Dabu tremendously. This is basically the Dabu counter through and through. In short, it is almost the anti-zombie version of Ramen, has decent stats, has decent DPS, has low cost, much like Ramen as well. It has a shorter range, it doesn't have a high attack rate like Ramen, but it does have multi-hit. It is the ultimate anti-zombie meat shield, so yeah, eventually you will have to get this unit and it will help out tremendously. On the topic of this niche, here's two more that I want to mention. First of all, it is Lumber Cat, aka Weed Whacker Cat. This is an anti-zombie crowd control unit with a rapid attack speed. It has a 5% chance to freeze, but with its crazy attack speed, it just gets pretty crazy once you start stacking them up, though it is not as stackable as other crowd control units. Also, it has Z-kill there just as a little bonus. Even after a few years, it's still not too easy to find units that cover this niche, so Weed Whacker is still here to help. And another unit covering that niche is of course Welterweight, aka Exoweight Cat. Much like Weed Whacker, this serves a very not popular niche, because even after so many years with this whole zombie enemy trait being introduced, there still isn't too much reliable crowd control units. So in a way, it is not a popular niche compared to like even medals, but recently there have been zombies being spammed in plenty of new stages, so this is a unit that can help out in some stages. It could bully a lot of zombie units that it outranges. It does have that very nice knockback. It has a quick attack speed as well with multi-hit, so it can activate that knockback on each of those hits. And also it has the perk of being a Z killer as well, though it is single target. Its range is not too crazy high, but it's enough to handle many of the pesky zombie peons. Overall, just a solid zombie, anti-zombie crowd control unit, just like Weed Whacker. There's two more units I want to mention in the rare cat category, and the first one being Rodeo Cat. Now this is a very odd unit in an odd situation because it is an anti-black crowd control unit, but as a gacha it's up against Bomber Cat, which is a completely free-to-play crowd control unit that completely just obliterates Rodeo in every way almost. However, there is some situations where Rodeo Cat does actually prove helpful over Bomber, and that being its range advantage. Though this is very much a case just like Sanzo and Necrodancer Cat. Rodeo has single target while Bomber has the AoE, but Bomber has less range and Rodeo has that advantage. Rodeo does also have a quicker attack animation, but it does have a longer recharge. But the biggest thing is Bomber is a guaranteed chance for freeze, while Rodeo is at that 30% chance. But the reason I bring up Rodeo now is because with its talents, it could actually become a very, well not very, just a solid anti-relic crowd control unit. It has that target relic talent, it has the resist curse, it also has the recharge reduction talent as well, which can help. So yeah, standing at 320 range, it can help against some of those relic peons. Though just like Necro, it should be paired as a support. So you can use this with like Thaumaturge, or pair this up with like slapsticks. This is probably the most situational out of all, because in the beginner phase, you'll only be worrying about the black enemies, while relics is more a thing at the end of the mid game. Lastly, it is of course the legend Cator, or Archer Cat's true form. This is a unit that also fulfills a very weird role because it has that multiple phase of niche, if you could say that, because in the early game you'll only be using it for its floating traits, while later on when you get those talents you can use it as an anti-zombie rusher type unit as well. Like with those talents you can definitely use this in a stage like Dabu or like the Revenge of Carnage Merciless stage, and its most famous use I see is its utilization in Little Flying, acting as a quick rusher type chip damage unit that could just go in, get hits off, and it has a decent range to where it could stack up if you can keep them alive. It does have 3 knockbacks and an okay amount of health, so if you manage to keep them alive, you can slowly start to stack them up, and the damage does add up pretty quick because Cator does have that massive damage ability, so it has that 3 times multiplier. Overall, it's just a solid anti-floating chip damage rusher type unit. I mean, with that movement speed, it can get in there and get lots of hits over time. I mean, it's almost guaranteed because at 390 range, there isn't much units that could outrange it in its niche. Even stuff like Queen Bee, it'll be able to get into the blind spot with its movement speed, though after that, I don't know what will happen. It's a solid anti-floating slash zombie with those talents, chip damage unit with a decent movement speed. Alright, there's one more unit I want to mention, and this is just in case you don't have a certain unit by the name of Courier, and the unit I'm talking about is Swordmaster's true form, aka E-Duelist. If you do not have Courier Cat for some reason, then E-Duelist is definitely a good pickup. It is the OG red killer or the red shredder. It has extremely high DPS against reds. It has that massive damage effect, so it does have that huge attack bonus against its traits. And you can get an extra bonus trait you can target with its Target Angel talent. Courier is just miles better, but there are some situations where you might want to use E-Duelist, so do keep that in mind for sure. It is a short range red and angel shredder. And that about covers the rare cat section of this video. Of course, I'm not going to go through every single one because this would be way too long, but I did cover all of the big ones, so if you have questions about other ones, just post it down below. Anyways, let's quickly move on into the super rare situational gachas now. Let's start with iCat. This is Applecat's true form. It's an anti-red crowd control unit. The reason it's so impactful is because it does have a fairly quick attack animation, and on top of that, being an area attack unit with huge crowd control potential, it has that guaranteed freeze chance, and its cost is not too high and its recharge is reasonable. Now with all that said, you must be wondering why this isn't a key gacha unit. Well, that's because its range does make it very situational, because it has a very short range. It does get bullied in a great amount of stages, so there's only specific uses for this. Its stats are okay as well, but that short range really does become an issue in a lot of stages. But that is the whole reason this is a situational unit, because this is definitely not a unit you can bring in every single lineup. It has its specific uses and specific stages. For an example, there is Crazed Axe as a beginner phase stage that it can pretty much carry. Next up we got is a unit in a similar case, and that is Juliet Cat's true form. This is basically the anti-angel version of iCat, except it has much better stats, much better range. It could actually do some damage compared to iCat, and the freeze chance is not guaranteed like iCat, but with that range it gets, it's pretty helpful. Even at 40% chance to freeze, it is still very helpful for crowd control. It has the same cost as iCat as well, but it also has a quicker recharge time. Overall, it's just a very great crowd control unit to have as an anti-angel freezer. Now Sanzo does exist and will be your main counter against angels for crowd control if you do get that talent, but do not sleep on Juliet Cat, that's for sure. With that freeze talent as well, you can definitely lock a bunch of units that get in your way. Next up, we got Medalist Cat's true form, aka Fiend Cat. This is a unit that can fulfill a lot of roles because it has that utility being an LD unit, that long distance. That could go up to, I believe, 550 range. So it can just be used as a general long-ranged unit. You can just use it as something to stack up against a pesky backliner or whatever. But the reason I'd say it's not a key gacha unit is because its stats aren't too crazy. I mean, its range is great with its LD, but its standing range can get screwed over sometimes. So do keep that in mind. It is AoE, but its recharge is not too great for someone you would want to stack up. Its movement speed is nice, so that's a bonus. It just sounds real mid until you realize there is potential with this unit and its talents. And even without its talents, it does have that Aku or anti-Aku abilities. So it can be an anti-Aku crowd control unit with that knockback. And the two talents that are real nice is that tough talent and of course the target angel talent. And of course the stat buffs are nice as well. That's really when you can get the most use out of this niche unit, once you start investing more into it. So yes, definitely a situational super rare here. Next up we have is Cutter Cat. This is basically the more situational version of Maglev or Bullet Train. It fulfills a role as a anti-red rusher burst damage unit. Its true form is especially nice at that as well, because it does get that much needed stat boost with its already broken strengthen effect. And that, with its survive, it could definitely be used against lots of pesky red enemies you might struggle with. It does have that bonus of area attack as well. Yeah, not much else to say here. In the right situation, this unit is a beast, so do not sleep on it. Though you can probably find some general use out of this unit as well, though it won't be as effective as Maglev, let's say. Next up we have is Driller Cat. Now unlike Cutter Cat, which is a rusher burst damage unit, this is a crowd control long range unit. But the reason why this is such a situational unit is because it's niche. It covers traitless. It is an anti-traitless unit which weakens traitless units. It has a 100% chance to proc that weaken ability, so it can be a safe long range debuffer. It has pretty good range at 460 that lets it sit back pretty far and snipe all of the backliners, and annoying units like Manic Tank or even Manic Macho, it could pretty much nullify them because having its weaken lets your big time Ubers and other units take extra hits without dying. Its long distance can reach up to like 650 range, so yeah, it could definitely snipe some units. And in its true form, it does gain that strong ability, so even more it is helpful against the traitless enemies. And once again, in a nutshell, the strong ability is you do 50% more damage and you take 50% less damage. So yes, a very situational unit for its niche, and a very great one once you do find its uses in stuff like Handful of the Crazed Cats and Manicat stages, Traitless Citadel, and stuff like Heavenly Tower. The only big downside to this unit, or two of them, is it's single target, and of course it has a very long recharge time. Now as for the other corp units like Saw and Pile Driver and all of those other units, they do have their specific niches, and they do have some good true forms and some great true forms like Cutter, but it's not something you should really chase after as a first priority. Like I said, these are not key gacha units. They fulfill a certain role in different situations, and stuff like Driller and Cutter are the ones I do recommend true forming, while the others are just basically up to you if you really need them. Like Sawcat, for example, which can be used as like a tanky anti-alien shredder. But since this video is mostly focused on the beginner phase, I'm not gonna prioritize or mention the rest of the corp units because they're only really effective once they get to their true forms, and you won't get their true forms until way later in the beginner phase, or even the beginning or end of the mid-game. Now a unit like Cat Jobs can prove to be helpful in a lot of stages, but it is very niche. Same with like Rich Cat. And of course there's other units down the line like Jotaro, the goat himself, which has an anti-relic niche use that isn't too reliable, but it could still be used in some stages as that anti-relic crowd control unit slash DPS. And I can't talk about a unit like Bathcat's true form or just Bathcat in general, but it's just hard replaced by Courier now. But if you don't have Courier, Bathcat can still prove helpful in a small amount of stages. Like with its range and its high single target burst damage, you can use it in like Realm of Carnage and Craze Monaco and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up most of the units I wanted to talk about for the super rares. Once again, if you do have questions about other units, just post it down below. And for those asking about Ubers and questions about utilizing their Ubers and which Ubers to use, which are the key Ubers, stuff like that, I don't really have too much expertise in that topic because I usually stay away from Ubers. Also, there is just way too many Ubers now, and if there were to be a future video about Ubers, I think it would be very, very long. And I was going to cover talent investments in this video as well. I did briefly cover about it on some units, but a whole dedicated video to units' talents and which to prioritize, which you want to upgrade, which you want to get first, stuff like that might be in like a whole separate video, so yeah, I won't make it a part of this video as it would be a little bit too long. I did try to keep this shorter than usual. I mean, we are crossing the 20-minute mark here, but this video definitely could have been longer for sure, but I'm happy to keep it short and to the point as much as possible while also being more informative. But yeah, that's all for this. Drop a like if this helped you out, of course. Subscribe if you're new. Also, Discord down below as always. I do got some stuff cooking, so we will see. If you're in the Discord, you will know for sure. But yeah, that's it. See ya.